wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro.
Now, finally, is the big day. So this is kind of like day one. So we woke up, got ready, had a big breakfast, packed all our kit, loaded it on the buses. Finally got on the bus, and from there we had like a 3-hour drive to the Kilimanjaro National Park, where we'll be starting the climb. When you get to National Park, it's buzzing with energy. Lots of different groups of people traveling, and the porters who help carry your kids and park and set up the camp, the tents. But we all sat around like a long table. We had a good lunch. And then as soon as you're done with the lunch, we commenced the climb. The starting point was Lemosho Gate, because for this climb we chose the Lemosho route, which is the more scenic route. And so after a few hours of walking and starting the climb, like it really hits in your face. You start doing inclines, like going up a hill and coming down. But this part of it was mainly a rainforest climate. So it acclimatizes you easily, like you have a good weather, it's temperate, it's not as dry. And then finally we reached MTI Mukumba camp for our first night of camping, and time to get the sleeping bags out. So this was kind of like a view of what was to come, where you do the climb during the day, and finally in the afternoon you get to a campsite. And the idea is from doing the climb, you will go through different climates, and you also get to acclimatize as the altitude increases. So for example, we started off at 2,100 meters. But yeah, that was it. That was the end of day one. So today was day two, and the goal was to get to Shira 1 camp. We kicked off the day. So after a cold night, the previous night sleeping and camping, we kicked off the day with a really big breakfast. So our climb had two parts. The first was a morning climb, which took us out of the rainforest region into the next ecosystem called the moorlands. Basically, we stopped for lunch. So first of all, we stopped for lunch at a high point after climbing for some hours, and then we went down something called the Shira Caldera Desert Plateau, which is fairly flat. It curves around, but fairly flat. And then after that, you go down. I think the main challenging bit for me, you go down and up a hill, and down and up a hill again, and so you start feeling the oxygen a little bit. And then finally we arrived at our destination at the camp for the evening, which was Shira 1, 3,600 meters. In total, the climb was about 6-7 kilometers, walking for about 7 hours. But from here, it was really good. You could start seeing the horizon of Uhuru Peak, so the peak we were trying to go far off. But yeah, it was exciting. Experience. So today I'll be talking about day 3 of my adventure climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. So day 3 was good. The goal was to go from the first camp we were staying at yesterday, Shira 1 camp, to Shira 2. Shira 1 was 3,600 meters, and Shira 2 is going to be 3,850, and a total hike distance about 10 kilometers. Now, when we woke up in the morning, I emerged out of our tent and everywhere was covered with like a thick layer of frost. Now, even though the previous day was quite warm and sunny, but in Kilimanjaro the weather changes quite dramatically, and the weather can drop as soon as the sun goes down, hence the frost. After tea and breakfast, so we had a tea and breakfast in a massive tent where everyone gathers, and like a mess tent. Now, after tea and breakfast, we had like a group stretching session outside. This was important. It helps you with the nerves, but it's also important because it was going to be a long day of walking. Now, in case you didn't know, Kilimanjaro is actually historically a volcano, and it has 3 peaks or 3 volcanic cones. One is Shira, one is Mawezi, and one is Kibo. Now, the Kibo cone is the one that has the highest peak, Uhuru Peak, where we were trying to go. And for the first time since we started the climb over the last 3 days, this was the first time we could see Uhuru Peak in the horizon, and it was huge. It looked gorgeous. During the stretch, we also got introduced to what will become our theme song, Hakuna Matata, which is a really nice song in Swahili about climbing Kilimanjaro, which is what I'm going to use for the theme song for this podcast. Now, for most of the morning, we were just walking across the Shira Plateau. Basically, it's a depression from an eruption years ago between Shira 1 and Shira 2. So it's fairly flat. It's about 13 kilometers. 13 kilometers from the main cone of Kibo. Now, it's 13 kilometers, and then the final section to get to Shira Camp is a bit of a up steepward climb. Now, just generally, I was of high spirit. It was surreal. The air, it was clean. The nature, the people, and just my team, the team camaraderie. But today was the first time I started to really feel the effects of altitude. Just as we got to that 3,800 meters mark. You feel out of breath, you feel like a little bit of a headache, a bit lightheaded. So what I did was I kept on taking the Damox altitude pill, which was helpful, had a little bit of side effects, one of which you end up going to pee all the time, which can be a bother, but at least it increases your chances of getting to the peak. I also, because of that, always feeling out of breath, I really focused on pacing myself, as opposed to trying to keep in pace with the rest of the group. I just really managed my energy levels. I also spent a lot of time to keep me motivated, listening to Afro beats and Ashake, Lonely at the Top. Something also that was really cool, I got to see this tree that is unique to East Africa called the giant groundsel. It's a cactus kind of tree that grows at altitude, and each branch takes 25 years to grow. So this one I saw that had multiple branches, was about 200 years old, which is cool. It was at this point as well, while working, that we were surrounded by clouds, so we're almost on the level of the clouds, so we're quite high. I was also able to finally reach my family and get some choppy signal and just say, hey, I know it's been 3 days, but I'm okay, which was good. So finally we completed the trip. We also had the option to do an optional climb afterwards, which was to somewhere called Shira Cathedral. It's a higher peak of 4,000 meters. Each time when you do those optional climbs, it helps your body like acclimatize to get used to the altitude, and then afterwards you can rest. But generally that was it. It was a good day. Day 3 done. It was pretty fun, and looking forward to tomorrow, day 4. Thanks for listening, and Nero out. Today was a big day, day 4. I was excited. We were going from Shira Camp to Baranco Camp. Now, they are very similar in altitude, 3,900 meters, but it was 9 hours away. Now, the interesting thing about this is a more challenging higher altitude part of the trip, because it consisted of 2 sections. Now, the first section is a 10 kilometers climb to somewhere called Lava Tower, which was 4,600 meters, so quite a jump from 3,900 to 4,600. And then the second part is you descend down to Barranco Camp. Now, just to start, this was the most intense for me. I constantly felt out of breath. Now, Lava Tower is simply a 300-foot tall rock formation formed by lava from the eruption of Kilimanjaro millions of years ago. And you walk for a long time to get to this spot, which is 4,600 meters, and this was our lunch spot. This was where we stopped to have lunch. Now, when we got to Lava Tower, this was also the point where we had left. So we started off on day 1 in a rainforest climate, and then we went into the moorlands, which is still very green. Now the landscape and the ground had completely changed. It was very rocky, obviously from all the eruptions. It was higher. After lunch, it was also today I got to learn the Swahili word you keep hearing anytime you go climbing here, which is pole pole, which is slowly. And the advice is, it just encourages you to move slowly at all times. Don't try and run, so that because you'll be out of breath and you could pass out. So yeah, generally it was fun. It was pretty amazing. I really felt the altitude like all the time, but pushed on and eventually made it to our final camp, Baranco Camp, 3,900 meters. It's here when you finally look back, you see how far you've come. Like you see the distance, the winding roads, the winding paths in the distance. You also have a really good view of Tanzania's second tallest mountain, which is Mount Meru. But yeah, it was really good. Now, one interesting fact. Barranco Camp is directly beneath the famous Barranco Wall. Now, anytime you hear anyone talking about climbing Kilimanjaro, they'll be talking about Barranco Wall, this really high, steep wall that you have to go through on this Lemosho route to get to the peak. So yeah, it was interesting seeing the wall. Like this is what we're going to be doing in the morning, but yeah, it was quite steep. But I was looking forward to it. We shall see. Day 4 over and Nero out. Thanks. Bye.
habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata.
Naomba dada tucheze.
Hakuna matata.
Unaweza kuja.
Hakuna matata.